the cultural variations and the different values that people place on things is, I think that's pretty straightforward. Although it's kind of interesting, you begin to think about the effects of globalization and the flattening of the world. Are we all becoming somewhat similar in many ways, and are a lot of the activities in the world sort of addressing this fear of homogenization of peoples and developing cultural similarities? So that's an interesting ongoing process. But so I think, you know, the cultural differences are the values that people place on different things, you know, that's pretty clear and unarguable, I think. But I think the other aspect of the cultural issues are the discerning what things are culturally and spiritually important to people, and the ability to quantify that and to value that in economic terms, I think, is incredibly limited, and that looking at this as a broader issue of valuation, I think we have to be a lot more humble and rigorous in our thinking about just the quantification of cultural and spiritual services, and not having to worry about the valuation per se. That a lot of the characterizations themselves, I think, are important and will play important roles in policy settings. So I guess, you know, here I am as an economist who's, you know, spent my life, or a lot of it, doing valuation, but coming to recognize, I think, that there are real honest limitations in how far you can go in monetizing these things. They become somewhat foolish after a point. This was kind of brought home to me in a project I was on in British Columbia on valuing wild salmon, and some of the First Nations peoples were there, and we had some nice conversations together and about the importance of salmon in their culture. And there were apparently some social scientists that came up to try to value salmon in that cultural context, and were asking questions about willingness to pay to preserve the salmon. And the reaction of the community generally was, we don't even want to think this way, that it's an insult, you know, to the integrity of our culture to even imagine monetizing something that is so embedded in our culture and pervades the whole spirit of our people. You know, as opposed to valuing salmon, you know, down in the, you know, the lower 48 as, you know, just the value for food consumption. You know, like we don't pray to the salmon and have, you know, lots of religious ceremonies surrounding the salmon when we go to eat it. So that kind of brought it home. I mean, we had a nice heartfelt conversation, and so I think that we have to be a little more careful about where we stop in our monetization and don't do foolish things. And so I guess that's my thing about valuation. I'm much more concerned at this stage in the development of projects like this that we have enough to do with the characterization and quantification of services, and that itself goes a long ways in providing useful input to policy decisions before we even compress and condense everything into some single unit of measure, whether it be dollars or beads or bottles of wine or whatever. So I'm not, in this particular project, I'm not so concerned about the valuation issue. And I think it raises, you know, once you jump into that, I think it raises so many issues that you begin to get eaten up by controversies surrounding valuation. And there's not really a need for that, I think, in this stage of understanding of how ecology and economics works together.